let's quickly have a chat about the Epstein files. And not specifically about the files themselves. I want to talk about the way that people have responded to the files, because there seems to be a handful of categories. I'm not going to go over the super category of content creators who are looking at the Epstein files and basically watching the world burn, because that's what your Asmongold types are doing right now. They're looking at the files and watching the world burn, and through watching the world burn, they are making money. And there is an argument to be made that I am doing no different by talking about it over on my channel. And I'm glancing over on my other screen because I had an outline for this, and I'm trying to find the conversation where the outline is. There we go. I've got it. I found it. Jessica says, "Hail Roach King, long may raid spray upon him." But before we get into that, I do want to say, hi, my name is Suris. If you're new here, I cover politics, and I cover things that I find important to me. If that is of value to you, if you like authenticity in your creators, which, I mean, it's all of us should be at this point, then please consider subscribing to my channel, maybe even checking out my Patreon, and maybe even checking out the other channels that I do content on. I have channels where I talk about Magic the Gathering, I have one where I'm currently talking about World of Warcraft, and I, of course, have the live channel where you can see things like me cooking, and all kinds of stuff that comes from this stream. So, let's go ahead and talk about the Epstein files after I'm done begging you to please subscribe to my channel and support what I do and let friends know what I'm doing over here. So you have 6 categories of people, as far as I can tell, that all have perspectives on the Epstein files. Again, some of these have overlap, but this is about where their large focus is. I'll go ahead and start with me. So I'm a leftist. And when I say I'm a leftist, I don't mean I'm a Democrat. I don't mean I'm a, progressive in social areas, but I think I'm conservative in fiscal areas. No, I want full-on fucking financial reform. I am a socialist. I want workers to own the means of production. I think that capital being in the hands of the few and the oligarchical is directly leading to the problems in society today. And as evidence of that, I have the general leftist perspective on the Epstein files that I have seen from a handful of creators and a handful of posts from different various groups. And that perspective seems to be a focus on power. The fact that the Epstein files are a conglomerate of information for us that show us exactly who and how much power has been consolidated in a group of small people and how interconnected those people are. It is basically a who's who of who the enemy of the left should be. And there are Republicans in there, there are Democrats in there, there are people who don't fall into those fucking categories because they're in different fucking countries. There's all kinds of people right now who are seeing that the reins of power are held by the few, and those few are really fucking problematic. Now, of course, you've got weird people who are anti-Semitic who go like, aha, there's evidence that the Jews are doing that. Like, no, we're not talking about that shit, because y'all have a tinfoil hat that is currently doing far more damage to your brain than you might think. But then let's go to the right. Let's go to the right, like the broad right. Like the broad left is looking at the power structures that are coming from this. The broad right is doing something different. The broad right is beating their chests, and they are going, Pizzagate was correct. That's what I'm seeing on the broad right. We are seeing people saying that QAnon is vindicated and Pizzagate was correct. Now, what they might not seem to realize is that Pole, the area where QAnon and Pizzagate and all those conspiracies were first fomented, was funded by another person who was implicated in the Epstein files, and specifically set up Pole after having a conversation with Epstein about having a containment chamber of places where those opinions could be fomented and could be stoked and could be shaped. So the right beats their chest saying that, oh, Pizzagate was correct, when Pizzagate was the obfuscation. The way that you lie, if you don't know, if you want to learn how to be a really good liar, the way that you lie is to tell the truth in a way that is ever so slightly twisted. If you can do that, you do 2 things. 1, it makes it way easier to keep your own story straight, because you are no longer lying. You're telling the truth, and it's verifiable. But by twisting it ever so slightly, by twisting that truth ever so slightly, you can create a lie. So, Pizzagate and QAnon. Let's twist the idea that there are people in power who are in control of everything and who are, in fact, being predatory toward kids. Now it's they want immortality because of adrenochrome. Now it's they actually have a pizza parlor where everything is happening and it's a specific place, and don't worry, we'll send a lone gunman down there to solve the problem. That'll fix everything. And also, Donald Trump is our guy who's going to drain the swamp of all of the corrupt politicians in there. There's your obfuscation, because Donald Trump is implicated in the Epstein files as a guy who has done all kinds of heinous things. I won't get into the specifics of that. You've probably seen those specifics 1,000 times already. I don't need to throw them at you. But while the right is focused on saying that they have the ideological victory of Pizzagate and QAnon being technically correct, they aren't technically correct. They were an obfuscated truth like every other really, really good lie. So while the left focuses on the evidence that this is proof that our enemies have a lot of power that is consolidated, the right is focusing on some type of ideological victory that actually doesn't manifest in reality in any meaningful way. But then we move on to the next set of very interesting people. The first set of interesting people we're going to talk about are the Democrats, the Democratic Party at large. Where's their focus? Well, their focus is largely on the victims of Epstein. Now, there's nothing wrong with this being your focus. Being focused on the victims of the Epstein files is morally the correct thing to do. I'm going to go ahead and throw a monkey wrench in there for you and say that by focusing so hard on the victims of the Epstein files and what we should do to make sure that there is recompense for the victims of Epstein and all of the billionaires that took part in heinous activities on his island and outside of that, because make no mistake, this doesn't end at the fucking island. By narrowing your scope in such a way, you've now suddenly done the exact thing that those billionaires want you to do. If every single one of those victims got everything that they personally needed, it would not do anything for the structures of power that ultimately led to them being victimized in the first place. You can fix every problem for each individual victim that exists right now, but you won't do anything to stop new victims from being created in the future, because all of the money, all of the power structures, all of the connections, all of that's still there. You got one guy. You got one fucking guy. That doesn't mean that you got rid of all of the reasons that the one guy was able to get enough power and influence to create an island where he had sex slaves. Leftists are focused on that power structure and trying to undermine it. Democrats largely are not focused on that power structure. They are focused on just the victims. Again, morally, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a very, very important place to have your focus. But it does not mean that you are going to solve the problem in the future. You're not going to be able to keep it from happening again to the scale that it already happened the first time. But then we move on to Republicans. Now, how are the Republican Party handling this? Well, by obfuscation, of course. So we're getting things like, how is the Dow? The Dow is over 50,000. We're getting shit like that. We are getting Kash Patel going, oh my God, this is the most transparent we have ever been in the United States government ever. What are you even talking about? The right is going to do everything in their power to throw this smokescreen, that smokescreen. You're going to hear things like, and you've already heard things like Donald Trump saying, I don't know why people are still talking about Epstein. I think America should move on to something it actually cares about. It's insane that so many people on the right, and there are people who are Democrats as well who are completely implicated in this too. I'm not saying that they're not. But it's amazing how so many of the Republicans on the right spend their time specifically trying to obfuscate on this, instead of recognizing it for what it is. And maybe it's because they're worried about their power being undermined. After all, if you're a Democrat, how do you approach the Epstein files without having your own power be undermined? Well, you focus on the victims instead of the power that also funds you. If you're on the right, how do you keep your power? You focus on obfuscating so that people are talking about something else, anything else. Now, there's two other types of people I want to talk about, and that's your mom and your dad. And when I say that, I'm talking about the bog standard conservative and the bog standard liberal. These are your basic ass person who is walking around right now, glancing at the news once in a while because they've, scrolled it on their phone and they see in there that, oh, new Epstein files have released. So what's the perspective from those two people? Well, if you're a liberal, the perspective that you're getting from there is being horrified and going, why doesn't anybody do something about this? Why is nobody doing anything about all of these horrible, horrible people who have had this power? And they don't spend any time to actually think about what systems existed to allow that power to consolidate in so few hands. That conversation never flits in their head. It's always, how do we retaliate? How can we do this? How can we get justice? How can we do that? It's a thing called the just world fallacy. The world was always just, but if you just correct things back to the status quo, if you can keep correcting them back to the status quo, then things will be good, not even recognizing that the status quo created the problem in the first place. That's your bog standard liberal. Why is nobody doing something about this? But they're not even thinking about what that something would even be in the first place. Then you have your bog standard conservative. And they are usually denying that Trump is in the Epstein files or saying that he's not actually been implicated, even though he is in the Epstein files. I've seen videos of parents talking with their kids saying that, no, Trump's in the Epstein files, but until there's a trial, and specifically he gets hit in that trial, they're not going to believe that he's actually been a victimizer of people, a predator towards children, and a predator towards women. No amount of evidence will move those people from that goalpost because they will be able to move it to something. They can, like your bog standard conservative can have the goalpost of he's not in the Epstein files, and then when he's in the Epstein files, it can be the goalpost moved to he's in the Epstein files, but in the same way that the people who are like really, really critical of Epstein are in there. It's people talking about him in emails. And then when you see that that's not the case, he's actually really, really friendly with Epstein, then the goalpost moves again. Well, he's not, he didn't go to the island, he didn't do things. And then if the goalpost moves again to him being on the island, now it's, well, he didn't hurt anybody there. He did what's his foot did, Howard Lutnick did, where he just went to the island and had dinner on the island for an hour and then left and did nothing else. And nothing else. So that's my perspective. And correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you've got a different perspective from what conversations you've had. Let me know in the comment section below. But from my perspective, I see leftists focused on the power, and this being evidence of how much power is consolidated and in whose hands. I see the right focused on Pizzagate conspiracy shit, despite the fact that by doing so, they're doing exactly what Epstein wanted in the first place with the whole fucking cheese pizza shit. Then I see Republicans focused on the Dow and obfuscation, and I see Democrats focused on victims, but not actually preventing this from happening in the future. I see bog standard conservatives focused on the fact that it totally can't be Trump, it totally can't be him, it totally can't be any of that. And then I see bog standard libs just shocked and appalled, and tomorrow they'll be shocked and appalled by something else. And that's a frustration for me, because I'll throw my cards on the table. I am a leftist. My perspective is that this shows where the power is consolidated in our country and others, and those people need to be taken out of power. Now, how you take them out of power is a conversation for places that are not on the internet, generally speaking. One of the places not on the internet where that conversation is happening is your local DSA. Because your local DSA, and there's a link to them in the description below, your local DSA is trying to undermine those powers by eroding their structures from underneath. That is one of the methods that is being utilized, and it's a method that I'm going to advocate for myself. getting involved in politics where you can, how you can, when you can, and getting involved specifically with the people who are actively trying to wrench power away from people who are not focusing where they should be. That's my perspective anyway. But let me know what your perspective is in the comment section below. That's just a musing that I've been dealing with, and I checked it with a few friends of mine as well, just to see if maybe I was off base, maybe I'm not off base, but that's where I'm at. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the Patreon if you want to hear my thoughts from behind the scenes. That said, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagittarius, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Sereth, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.